Hello, my name is Lauren Lee, and I am legal counsel for Adventure Awaits Incorporated, and I am asking the court to grant summary judgment on the plaintiff's complaint alleging that she was discriminated against because of her disability. During her time at Adventure Awaits, Ms. Perry worked as a lead loader, a position that requires an abundant amount of physical labor. On October 17th of 2020, Ms. Perry suffered severe spinal injuries during a hunting accident. She was not able to go back to work until February 2021 when she was cleared by her doctor with some restrictions. When she came back to her Adventure Awaits, it was both apparent to Ms. Perry and Adventure Awaits that she would no longer be able to return to her position as lead loader because of the limitations that she had on her physical movements. Her spinal injuries included not being able to walk or bend or climb for long periods of time, and also to not engage in repetitive movements. Ms. Perry had a meeting with Shelley Martin, the Director of Human Resources, in which she instructed Ms. Perry to apply for a stockroom supervisor position for an equal opportunity to continue her work at Adventure Awaits. Adventure Awaits has a transfer policy that prohibits automatic reassignments to positions, and as a result, Ms. Perry had to apply and be a part of the competitive selection process for the job instead of being assigned automatically. Adventure Awaits then ranked the 6 candidates that applied to the job, including Ms. Perry, based on skill performance tests, and hired the candidate that had the highest combined score. Unfortunately, Ms. Perry ranked 3rd and was not hired for the position. Ms. Perry alleges that Adventure Awaits failed to reasonably accommodate her by not reassigning her to the stockroom supervisor position. The Americans with Disability Act forbids employers from discriminating against a qualified individual. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, a qualified individual is a disabled person able to perform the job's essential functions with or without accommodation. Discrimination occurs when an employer refuses to make a reasonable accommodation for an otherwise qualified employee, unless that employer can demonstrate that the accommodation would impose an undue hardship on the business. Out of Ms. Perry's complaint, we have 2 issues that arise. The first one being whether Ms. Perry is a qualified individual protected under the Americans with Disability Act. And the second one is if she is a qualified individual, whether Adventure Awaits violated the Americans with Disability Act and discriminated against Ms. Perry when they made the decision to not transfer her to the stockroom supervisor position. Ms. Perry alleges that working from home would enable her to perform the essential functions of the job and therefore is a reasonable accommodation to her disability. Despite this claim, her accommodation to work at home does not allow her to perform essential job duties. Ms. Perry must perform the rudimentary duties of being a stockroom supervisor. The accommodation that Ms. Perry is requesting is that of being able to stay home for 2 or 4 days without prior notice, and as to which days she will need, or the duration of the time that she will need to be at home during this time. The responsibilities of a stockroom supervisor require that the supervisor is on site to enforce Adventure Awaits standards on the sale floor and in the stockroom. Adventure Awaits also requires that the supervisor to monitor daily and execute necessary stockroom and merchandising adjustments. Although Ms. Perry may be able to execute some of the inventory, monitoring, and communication with employees over the computer, she will not be able to reasonably monitor the stockroom or sales floor promptly. On the days that she will be at home, she will need assistance of others on site to determine whether in-store standards are being enforced. The only part of the job that Ms. Perry will be able to perform at home is some of the computer tasks. However, those computer tasks only take 20% of a supervisor's time. Out of an 8-hour workday, only 1 hour is spent on the computer, and the computer deals directly with inventory systems that must be up to date. They cannot pile up. Unfortunately, because of the direct conflict with the accommodation and the responsibilities of the job, the accommodation is not reasonable because it does not permit Ms. Perry to perform all the essential job functions in a way that is not burdensome to the company. To be qualified, Ms. Perry must perform all the essential responsibilities of a stockroom supervisor. However, Ms. Perry's suggested accommodation only allows her to perform the tasks on some of the tasks on the computer and not any of the on-site responsibilities without having to allocate those responsibilities to another coworker. Ms. Perry's stay-at-home accommodations would impose an undue burden on Adventure Awaits and its employees. Ms. Perry would be allocating her duties to another employee, and by doing so, she's creating more obligations for her coworkers. Ms. Perry will need to be able to communicate the stockroom operations with another staff member to ensure that Adventure Awaits standards are being met while she is at home. Safety and visual standards will not be able to be enforced by Ms. Perry. These standards will need to be implemented by another employee that either will need to be in communication with Ms. Perry or already be well versed in the stockroom supervisor position and duties, thus creating essentially another stockroom supervisor to be able to help Ms. Perry. While at home, Ms. Perry will only be able to perform the responsibilities that require a computer. Any on-site duties will need to be delegated to another person while she's at home. And there is no time frame for how long she will be needing to stay at home. And again, these days will be unscheduled. Ms. Perry will burden others with her obligation, and this imposes an undue hardship not only on on Adventure Awaits, but also on her coworkers. Although there are exceptions to an undue burden, Adventure Awaits does not have a history of waiving their transfer policy or of making exceptions for other disabled individuals. In conclusion, Adventure Awaits is asking the court to consider a summary judgment on the plaintiff's claim that the defendant failed to accommodate her disability. Aspen Perry has sued for disability discrimination, alleging that the failure to reassign her to stockroom supervisor deprived her of equal employment opportunities. Ms. Perry states that she will need to be able to stay at home for a few unscheduled days out of the month as part of accommodation for her disability. Adventure Awaits denies that Ms. Perry is a qualified individual capable of performing all essential functions of the job. Adventure Awaits also contends that if Ms. Perry can establish that she is a qualified individual, reassigning her to the stockroom supervisor would impose an undue burden on Adventure Awaits, and therefore we should be granted summary judgment. Thank you.